Welcome to Church Without Walls. I'm John, and this is
Poe.
John and Poe. We're daddy and a daughter, and one thing about the show, it's not scripted, obviously. And
Absolutely not.
a lot of times we'll come into what we call the nest, the sparrow's nest, and I'll say to Peyton, I don't know what we're going to talk about. And she'll say, what should I paint? And today, we didn't have an answer for that. So, this could be dangerous. I know my wife is cringing right now. But we'll see where this goes. So that's the thing about the show is we want to be honest. So we hope I know we're late today too.
Yeah, we're just a mess.
We
We're a mess.
we believe one of the dogmas, one of the doctrines of this show is Jack Johnson. He's one of our apostles, and Jack Johnson famously wrote a song called "Banana Pancakes," where he says, "Wake up slow." And that's exactly the kind of morning we had today. It's a rainy morning in Arizona. I had nightmares, so I didn't sleep well. And so
And
we
I
woke up
stayed up
slow.
late.
We watched some Chip and Joanna Gaines. We ate some. What did we have today? Pop-Tarts?
No, you had Pop-Tarts, I had a tea Roodle.
Yeah, it's been that kind of morning. And then I'm sure we'll have things to talk about, so stay with us. We're not going to be long today, I don't think. But so anyway, here's something that did cross my mind today, and that is a friend of mine has posted some videos with a guy I really like. His name is Randall Rouser, and he calls himself the tentative apologist. And I'm not a big fan of apologists, but he's the unapologist. He's not like your typical apologist, and one of the things I love about Randall is he gets you to think, and also, and something we share in common is he hates bullies. A lot of times, the only criticism of modern Christianity there is from YouTube atheists. And this is a real problem because there is some introspection. I said introspection. There's some introspection. We need to look at ourselves because we do look fat in that dress and we have a run in our stocking, and a lot of times the Christian church looks a lot more like a Karen. See, I'm kind of hip using the vernacular of the street. A lot of times we look more like a Karen than this glorious white bride. White bride. Bride in white garments. White bride. What the heck? So, and oftentimes we'll see it in other groups that we critique. I mean, I remember after 9/11 happened, there were a lot of people saying, where are the Muslims? Where are the Muslim voices who are speaking against this crazy terrorist corner of their religion? And there were some. But the same thing could be asked of us, of the Christian church. Where are the Christians that call out the craziness? Maybe not the crazy people. It's more, the behaviors. Where are the Christians that call out the craziness perpetrated by Christians in the name of Christ? Because we shouldn't just allow the critique to be by people from without the church, because then it looks like we are hypocrites or we're hiding something, or we don't recognize that the church has failures and has had failures ever since its inception. And so one of the things I like about Randall Rouser is he's willing to go there. Over the last few months, he's been kind of on a kick discussing a handful of people in the Christian church that he refers that I even have referred to as gatekeepers, people who are seeing this phenomenon of people leaving the church, of them deconverting or deconstructing or finding a place in Christianity that's more comfortable for them. Usually mainline Christianity, or some would say liberal, or some would say progressive, just non-evangelical, really, and maybe Orthodox. And yet there's this group of apologists and YouTube theologians and spiritual leaders in the evangelical movement who are trying to either slam that door or explain it away. And so a number of them, and he names names, and a few of the names are Alyssa Childers and Mike Winger and Lee Strobel, and I can't remember who else he names. But he names a list of, the usual suspects of people who are saying, you ignore what's happening. Oh my God. Are you okay? I gave you like a basketball elbow going for a rebound. Are you okay? Oh, okay. Now we're even. But I forgot what I was going to say now, though.
Yeah, because you hit the brain cells out of my head.
I knocked you into tomorrow. Yeah. Mm.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
Get back on track, Dad.
There is no track. Peyton laughed today before we came on. She said, boy, we're taking the script and just throwing it into the dumpster.
And we never have a script.
Well, we never have a script. So I was talking about Randall Rouser. And, okay. So he's been talking about these gatekeepers who are trying to grapple with the phenomenon of people leaving the church or leaving their corner of the Christian tent. And they can't ignore it. They started by trying to ignore it, and then they tried to dismiss it. And now it's so overwhelming they can't ignore it, so they're writing books about it, and they're trying to do podcasts about it. And after Rachel Held Evans died, there was a famous podcast, a couple of them by Alyssa Childers, where she wondered if she was even saved. And this is the typical fear and loathing of the other, or of things that are different. And it's kind of based on this pride that is, you're the only real Christian in the room, and you're the only one with all the answers, and you've got to correct everyone else. Now, this may sound odd to you, because I just said that Christians do need to critique bat crap craziness within the church, and maybe that's what they think they're doing. And I think they are sincere in what they're doing. They really believe it. I just think they look a lot more like the Pharisees in Luke 15 than they do the Father. And that's the major problem that I would have. But here Randall Rouser is pointing out that these people are saying that progressive Christians, or Christians who don't think like them, aren't really Christian. And he brings this out. I think Sean McDowell and Alyssa Childers have kind of made this comment in a book and on podcasts, and he's calling them out for it. And he's basically saying it's not true, right? That progressive Christians are Christians too. Now, a few weeks ago, I mentioned that I'm not a progressive Christian, although many people would probably either categorize me that way or say I'm not really a Christian anymore, because I don't hold some of the beliefs I used to hold, and I don't worship the Bible as the inerrant Word of God and that kind of thing. But I have a lot in common with progressive Christians, but I don't like the label. I don't accept the label. I don't like labels anyway, but we do have some differences. But so Randall's big point in these videos is he's saying it's just not true. It's not right for them to say that liberal Christianity, I think the term is that progressive Christianity is a whole nother religion. This is what Alyssa Childers says. This is what Sean McDowell says. And as one of my favorite biblical textual scholars says, Daniel McClellan says, I support this creator's rhetorical position, but I have to differ with what he's saying here. I love Randall Rouser, but I think he's protesting too much in this way, not in the Shakespearean way, but in this way. It is a different religion. I'm not saying you're not Christian, Randall, or that my progressive brothers and sisters aren't Christian, but I am saying it is a different religion from what Sean McDowell and from what Alyssa Childers believe is Christianity. And this might hurt some people, and I'm saying it. I'm sure I'd love to talk to Randall about it sometime, but Here's what I would say. When the atheists portray the Christian God in kind of the Calvinist vein, this kind of angry, sovereign, do what he pleases because he's all powerful, and who are we to dare question him because we're the clay and he's the potter, and he predetermines not only who will spend an eternity with him in heaven, but who will be damned to hell. So we really don't have any choice, and there's rhetorical contortions they make to still put that on under our accountability. And there are corners of the Calvinist church like John Piper who basically have God basically being the author of evil too. So it's like this is the God that Christopher Hitchens argues against. This is the God that Richard Dawkins argues against. And I think every Christian who celebrates and honors God should stand up and say, actually, Hitchens and Dawkins are right in the critique of that God, because I don't accept that God either. And that may make me closer to atheists than to Christians when it's in the understanding of that God. And I will say this, Randall, I've heard you say that their version of the God of the Bible is one who only accepts penal substitutionary atonement with the end being eternal conscious torment. And that is a different religion from what I understand of God in Christ. I don't have this same feeling or need to want to be in the team picture with them. Because I think there's so much baggage there in that corner that is the reason, actually that corner of the church is the reason many people are leaving it. So I don't really want to argue my way back into the team picture with them. This is some of what we talked about last week, that when we said I'm a Christian, but it's complicated. But let's face it, the Bible is filled with God rebuking Israelites for taking his name in vain. The Bible is filled with not only apostles, but Christ himself writing to churches who basically saying, the name of Christ is slandered because of your behavior and your actions and what you're teaching and how you're acting. So I don't have a problem with this. Paul writes to the Galatians that this Jesus that you preach and worship is another and different Jesus, and you should treat it as a dead, rotting body, as this Jew going to a holy day, wanting to avoid the rotting corpse at the side of the road so he's not defiled. So that's an anathema. I don't mind saying I do think that the religion of Alyssa Childers and Sean McDowell is an anathema. I don't think it brings glory to God. I think it brings shame to God. And I think it is one of the accelerants to this fire that we're seeing that we call deconstruction or deconversion. So I don't mind that they're saying that I or Randall or others or Rachel Held Evans or Peter Enns understand Christianity so differently, it's a different religion, because I don't accept their definition of Christianity, and I would never want to. Now, that's not saying now, please don't get me wrong. I'm not the reverse. I'm not the antithesis of Alyssa Childs. I'm not saying that Alyssa Childs, is it Childers? Alyssa, whatever her name is. Alyssa and Sean and Mike Winger and all them are damned and they're going to hell and they're not saved. I'm not saying what they're saying about people who are others, or like Rachel Held Evans. I'm not saying that. It's more complicated than that. I don't believe they're under God's condemnation. I don't believe they're even, way outside of what Orthodox Christianity has come to mean in America. But I do think that version is dishonoring to God. I don't think it brings him honor. I don't think it brings him glory. I don't think it presents him as Christ, who is the fullness of the Godhead bodily, who says up front that his mission to the world, his whole goal in coming here in the incarnation, and is to set free the oppressed, is to give sight to the blind. I don't. It's to bring good news to the poor and the meek, the marginalized. I just don't think that version of Christianity reflects that nature. So I guess. Oh wow, that's super cool.
Thank
Wait,
you.
let me go to that real quick and like a little preview because I need a drink. You got that? Mm. Mm-hmm. Big screen PoCam.
Mm-hmm.
I like this, but we haven't used Peyton Cam in a while. Look at that. It has that little crawler at the bottom where it goes to Luke 15, which is kind of our motto, to leave the field of the Father and venture into the far country to help our brothers and sisters find their way home. Not back to the church as an institution, but back to the, I would say Father's table, back to the family of God, but yeah, back to the dinner table. Oh, I like this. Haven't read this in a while. We believe that the center of growth in church history has never been a where and a when, but a who. I like that. All right. So back to this. So look, I'm not here to try and correct Randall Rouser. I accept everything that he's trying to do by calling out these bullies who are saying, don't listen to those people because they're not real Christians. You know, one of the first things I think that I realized growing up, because my father was an intellectual and not an academic, but an intellectual, and I was surrounded by books from the time I was a little guy. Actually, he left me his library of 3,000 books, which now gathers dust at my former church. Considered a gift. Because all my books are on my Kindle now, on my phone. But my father always taught me, don't trust people who tell you not to read certain books. He always said that they're always, because they're responding out of fear and they may be trying to hide something. He pointed out that that's what cults do. They regulate, the information that is available to the group as a way to manipulate and keep control. He had Mein Kampf in his library. He had the Communist Manifesto in his library. He had all kinds of books that he disagreed with, but that he had read and marked up and wrote in the margins. And the way he did it, because he didn't want people to think when he died, if they walked through his library, that he was a closet Nazi or a communist. What he'd do with books that were charged like that, but that he wanted to know about and study, he'd keep them in his library, but upside down. Kind of like the distress signal for an American, is to turn the American flag upside down, and that's to let people know that things aren't right, that there's distress going on. And so all those books that he was worried about people finding in his library after he passed and saying, oh, Kirkwood was a Nazi or a communist, he'd have those upside down. He didn't have a sign explaining that, but he'd have them upside down in his library to let people know that this was an intellectual exercise and not one that he was celebrating. But that learning that as a young man has always made me want to read or listen to the people who others would tell, gatekeepers would tell me, don't pay attention to them. Don't listen to them. They're dangerous. I think it's much more dangerous, that kind of censorship, because it really takes away critical thinking and the idea that you can trust yourself, and it makes you a cog in a machine. Oftentimes, it's just the guard at the mouth of Plato's cave. And you live and die in a cave where you think those shadows on the wall are dangerous and they're monsters and we can't go outside. So when I started questioning my own views. And the most important question I ever asked myself is, what if I'm wrong? You know, I was 50 before I ever asked that question, because I grew up in a world of evangelical Christianity. Even though I tell you this about my father, I grew up in a world that prided itself on having an answer to every question, and putting a priority on certainty. And doubt or questioning in that world was seen as unhealthy. It was seen as somebody who's a troublemaker or a rabble rouser, or somebody of little faith, of weak faith. And so there was this cognitive dissonance that I grew up with, because I had parents who told me, be your own man, think for yourself, read widely, and, you know, nurture the discernment that God has given you. And then I grew up in the same world that was telling me that you can't trust your heart or your mind, but you could trust ours, you know. The gatekeepers. Yeah, you can't trust your own, but you can trust ours, because we've heard from God. We speak for God, or at least we translate for Him. And I saw enough of that in our world to finally, in my 50s, realize, as my heroes began to fall when they were tested under a political campaign, and I saw them go against everything they've taught and believed in for years, because of fear and loathing of the other side, and willing to accept somebody they never would have accepted, or they never would have tolerated. If he was on the other party's ticket, they would have ripped him to shreds. But I started questioning everything at that point, when I saw these so-called heroes of mine worshiping the golden calf. And I said, wait a minute, what about all this you've taught all these years and believed? And fear and loathing just took over. So I started questioning everything. I said, what if I'm wrong? And I started to read outside my circle, which is something my father promoted all along, but I never really did. I thought I was well read on things like how we got our Bible, and things like the evolution creation debate. I thought I was well read on that, but I was only reading within my tribe. And when I started to read the critique of my tribe, like the Bible says, by the way, it is biblical to consider both sides, as it says in the Psalms. It is biblical to consider both sides, because otherwise you don't have the knowledge to take a choice or to make a decision, because you haven't heard the side cross-examined. And this is what the Bible says a wise man does. So when I started to finally do that, and I started to read the other side, and I saw all the holes in some positions that I held. I saw all the straw men that our side had built up. I saw how flimsy and weak the arguments were. Not in everything. I'm still a Christ follower. I adore Jesus, and I think that's the answer to all the quagmire that the American church is in right now, is to get back to Jesus, and stop worshiping our tradition or the Bible, and get back to the person and work and words of Jesus. But when I started to ask, what if I'm wrong? It created this humility within me, and this awakening that I had the capacity and I had the responsibility to consider not just both sides, but all sides, because sometimes there's more than two sides to a question. And I began to read more widely, and I could see glaring examples of where Christian people like Lee Strobel or Sean McDowell, had lied, truly, had mischaracterized other arguments, had shared misinformation that had been debunked. And it was obvious, it was glaring to me, and it was shocking for me to see that Christian people, that people that work in Christian ministry, were so concerned with winning an argument that they were willing to cut corners when it came to actually objective truth and honesty. And it was also shocking to me to find out that there were other Christians like Randall Rouser, like Rachel Held Evans, like Peter Enns, like Francis Collins, and of course like C.S. Lewis, who challenged a lot of these things, who pointed out their weaknesses, who demonstrated that this is not healthy for a truly robust faith, for a faith that would withstand the storm that was coming. And now, a lot of those who built their faith on sand, storms came and they're out of the faith now. Some of them are YouTube atheists right now. And I believe they're actually closer to God than when they were believing falsehood within the church now. I actually think they're closer to God now around that mountain going up toward home than they were before. However, a lot of people have been scarred by their experience. And, you know, when you're lied to by somebody, when you trust somebody implicitly and you find out that they've been lying to you or sharing misinformation with you and ignoring actually clearly precise rebuttals, you have a trust issue. So a lot of the people that, you know, this kind of ministry or other ministries deal with, that are dealing with the people who have left the church or who have been harmed by it, but still have a yearning, they still have a desire to probe things spiritually, and maybe they still have an admiration for Christ, even though sometimes they can't see him beyond what the mess that the Christian church has made. That's something I can admire, and that's something that I want to be in. That's the place I want to be. I want to be in those conversations. I want to walk with those people. I want to hear their stories. I want to listen to them, because oftentimes they've lived a lifetime in a church without ears and without eyes. They've lived a lifetime in a place, in a family, where they have not been seen or heard. And they've just been told what to believe. They've been told how to think. They've been told what to see and what to ignore. And we live in a time, because of technology and because of the internet, where that just won't do anymore. Because they're not only hearing John MacArthur on Sunday morning, they're hearing responses to John MacArthur. And some of those responses are from Christians and some are from atheists, but they're all actually more profoundly truthful than what they heard growing up. And they resonate more. And they're more authentic. And there's less smoke and mirrors involved. And so I think this is where we find ourselves. You know, we were supposed to banter, but I've been doing all the talking.
What do you want me to say?
I'll have you talk about your artwork, because you're almost done.
Yep.
So I'm going to leave you with this, folks. One of the most profound questions we can ever ask ourselves is, what if I'm wrong? So jot that down in your journal and ask that about every aspect of your life, because the truth doesn't fear scrutiny. And truth will hold up under scrutiny. And some things will fall away. I look back now on my experience over the last 5 years, 6 years, and I see myself before. I told Wendy, out of 20 years of ministry, I'm only proud of my last 3, where I focused on the love of God, and I made that the centerpiece of my ministry, and it helped me kind of lead me forward, as not just as a pastor, but as a father and as a husband and as a human being, as a neighbor. But so ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? And how would I know if I'm wrong? Be open to read widely. I got into this because I wanted to be the best. Really, I wanted to be able to argue and give the best arguments for my side. And at the time, I didn't realize I was wrong about so much. So in learning the best arguments for my side, I had to learn the best arguments against my side. And guess what? Some of those arguments convicted me. Can you still hear? Oh, okay. Some of those arguments were convicting. And there were some painful moments. I can remember one that my wife is shaking her head up and down, where I'm reading a book by Francis Collins called The Language of God. Got about halfway through it, got to a chapter on the chimpanzee genome, and I closed the book, and I felt like I'd just been beaten with sticks by an angry mob. I felt so defeated. I had come face to face with truth, and I had surrendered. And I had realized I'd been wrong, and I'd even been teaching falsehood all my life. And I shared this with Wendy, and she felt the same kind of disruptive, like, it wasn't necessarily a fear, but a despair almost, that I did. And she, it's disconcerting to get there, but an honest man has to move on from that and embrace it and accept it and apologize to people he may have led down the wrong path. So I guess that's a really important question for us. What if I'm wrong? And how would I know if I'm wrong? Be willing to read widely and to be open to critique, and actually listen to understand. Don't just listen to respond, which was a whole new practice for me, because if I didn't have the answer, I'd go read Norman Geisler's book, 200 Answers to Hard Questions, and I'd find it for you, even if I was uncomfortable with it because it seemed a little shady. There's a lot of shady answers in evangelical Christianity because you know what? No one has those kind of answers, but maybe God. We're not omniscient. And if we truly believe the Bible, then we agree with Paul when he says we see through a glass darkly. That makes us humble towards our own understanding, but it also makes us feel empathy towards others. That should make us willing to hear and to see others as they are, not as we think they are or want them to be. I'll leave you with one last thing, and then we'll go to Poe's artwork here. In the apologist, atheist argument, you have atheists over here and apologists over here, and in some cases, they both think they know, and they're trying to convince the other side, or at least rebut the other side and say everything they think is wrong and everything they think is wrong. And I think both sides are worth listening to, and a lot of times I agree with that side more than this side. But I'd say that they're missing the mark when it comes to like trying to determine ultimate meaning in the universe. Christians will say without God there is no meaning in the universe, and sometimes atheists will say there really isn't any meaning in the universe. We just got to get on with life, and they're believing in false meaning because they've created this false sky god. And I don't think you could prove meaning, and yet I think every individual believes in meaning, even the atheist, and believes in purpose. I don't think you need to prove God for that. I think the yearning to matter is in every human soul. Now, I believe God put that there, but I wouldn't try and prove it to an atheist. I would just try and suggest to him that we might not be able to prove meaning in life or an ultimate purpose, but we definitely can prove the yearning for it. In relationships, you see this. In humanity, in the species Homo sapien, relationships are a key to the meaning in life. They're so important. The fact that we are an emotional creature and that we grieve and that we laugh, that we cry, this is a proof, if you will, that there is a yearning for meaning. Even, I'd say to my atheist friends, look, you think all religion is a contrivance, a psychological contrivance of humanity to deal with issues that scare him, issues like immortality or mortality, the fact that death really seems to be the one human constant, right? The one thing that is 100%. And I would agree with you. I actually think most Christians would agree with you about other religions, that other religions were created to solve some kinds of concerns that a people group has had, and to give them some kind of solace in kind of dark situations or inexplicable situations. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I do think that these things are actually a proof that every individual desires meaning, and they want to matter. I want to matter in the life of my children and my neighbors. And I know I'll be gone soon. I'll be ashes soon, and that my children's children won't remember me. I know that I'm here but for a fleeting instant, and yet I still want to matter in that instant. I want to make a difference. I think that's in every human soul. I think that's a proof that matter matters, that meaning it actually does exist. And tying that to God is a separate question, but I'm talking too long, right?
No.
Banter. Okay, let's go to Poe.
Oh, me?
Why not? Which camera do you want? You want that? You want the full
Either
screen?
one.
Let's go full screen.
Okay. This is We Got Nothing. Today we had absolutely nothing. So we just did that. We did nothing. And this is a bunch of random stuff.
It was a rando.
Yeah, rando. We got nothing. This is just a bunch of nothing.
It was a Seinfeld episode.
Yeah, a Seinfeld episode.
We did Seinfeld today.
A show about nothing.
Awesome.
Yeah. Today I had nothing. Dad had nothing.
I just went to a blank screen. Why did I go to a blank screen? All right. I think we're good.
Crazy. Yeah.
What now?
Nothing.
Let me tell you what now. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that.